Creep number 2. I'm a 17-year-old female living in the UK. At the time of this encounter, I was 12 years old. I was living in the south of England at the time, and had recently changed schools. It was quite far away, which meant I had to get up early to take 2 trains by myself to get there, as my parents were working and unable to drive me. The commute took about an hour and a half either way. I spent an hour and 15 minutes on one train, and got off at the second to last stop to change trains. The second train was just a 15-minute journey, and was always crowded as there were a lot of other school kids on it. But no one else lived where I did, so there were no school kids with me on the first train. I quickly got used to the journey. The way there was always fine, as I got in the same time as all the people traveling to work, so I felt safe with all the professional adults around me. The journey back was quieter, but also fine, at first. Then it became less pleasant. I started to keep seeing the same man on my journey back, and he always seemed to be staring at me. He looked to be in his late 40s, casually dressed, if somewhat scruffy looking, and he was a bit chubby. Now, the majority of the people on the train would go onto their phones or read a book, or the newspaper, or even just look out the window if they had nothing better to do. But this man would just sit, hands folded in his lap, and stare at me. Every time I caught his eye, I would look away, only to look back a few minutes later and catch him still staring. At first, it didn't seem so bad. It was just staring, but I started to feel more uncomfortable as time went on. It seemed like he was starting to gradually move, so he was sitting closer and closer to me. Up until one day, he was only about 2 seats away from me. Although I did feel uncomfortable, I still thought maybe it was just coincidental. After all, he always got off 2 stops before me. One day, however, I was getting on the train, and had already sat down by the window and noticed him getting onto the carriage next to the one I was in. However, as he was getting on, he turned and saw me, and did this weird creepy grin. At this point, he quickly moved over and got into the carriage I was in, and instead, promptly sat down across from me. As the train made its way back, I got a phone call from my mom. I stupidly had the volume all the way up so people nearby could hear what she was saying. She told me that she was going to be late to meet me at the train station, which meant that I would have to wait for her all by myself. The train station was always poorly lit and quiet, as it was the final stop. Also, there were never many staff members around either, so I was already nervous about the idea of waiting there. However, what happened next made me feel worse. Once the phone call ended and I put my phone away, the creep leaned forward slightly, gave me the same creepy grin as before, then resumed his usual position, hands folded in lap, creepy stare. I knew he had heard the conversation. The train continued its journey. The carriage was getting emptier and emptier. We stopped at the third to last stop, where the creep usually got off, and I expected him to stand up, but he didn't. The train started moving again, and inside I was panicking. The next station was 5 minutes away, and at this point it was only me, the creep, and one other person in the carriage, and that person was about to get off the next stop. I started to feel really panicked. The train eventually stopped, and the person got off, leaving me and the creep in the carriage. At this point, I didn't know what to do. There were people still on the platform, so Creep didn't do anything yet, but he started grinning at me and shifting slightly in his seat, leaning closer to me. At first I froze, then I had an idea. Before the train left the station, I bolted through the still open carriage doors, sprinted down the platform, and quickly got onto another carriage, ducking down slightly so the creep wouldn't see me. I saw he had also gotten off the train to follow me. Fortunately, he hadn't seen where I went, so he was just standing there looking confused and somewhat irritated. The train started to move again, so I felt comfortable enough to sit up and relax. Creep caught sight of me as the train moved past, and his expression terrified me. He had a look of pure, unadulterated rage on his face, and his hands were clenched into fists. He stood there, watching me as the train passed. Fortunately, my mom had actually managed to get to the station in time, so she was there to meet me off the train at my stop. I didn't tell her what happened right then, as I was worried that I'd get in trouble for some reason. It was a Friday, so I had the whole weekend before I had to make the journey again. But by Monday, after freaking out and locking myself in the bathroom for half an hour so I wouldn't have to go to school, I told her what had happened. For the following week, she would meet me after school to get to the train with me, and see if I could spot the guy so we could get a good description of him to report to the police. We never saw him again though. In the end, we ended up moving to a different part of the UK a few weeks after that, completely unrelated reasons, and I finished up school early, so I never had to make that journey again.